Why does sleep matter so much from a neurological standpoint?
Emerging evidence suggests that sleep is, if not the cornerstone, then certainly a fundamental tenet of pretty much every aspect of our waking lives. What happens when we don't sleep enough is that there are hormonal changes within our bodies. Increased inflammation is a risk factor for things like cardiovascular disease and potentially also cancer.
What hacks or tips do you have that could help somebody who's struggling with sleep better?
I think the key thing is to try and recognize what is going on with your sleep. Once you've recognized that you've got a sleep disorder or insomnia, or whether you're just chronically sleep deprived, that is the key to really making progress in terms of improving your sleep.
This has been really enlightening, like really, really good. So, hey guys, listen, we're all trying to get more productive. And the question is, how do you find a way to get an edge? I'm a big believer that if you're getting mentoring or you're in an environment that causes growth, a growth-based environment, that you're much more likely to grow and you're going to grow faster. And that's why I love Growth Day. Growth Day is an app that my friend Brendan Burchard has created that I'm a big fan of. Write this down, growthday.com/ed. So if you want to be more productive, by the way, he's asked me, I post videos in there every single Monday that get your day off to the right start. He's got about $5,000, $10,000 worth of courses that are in there that come with the app. Also, some of the top influencers in the world are all posting content in there on a regular basis, like having the Avengers of personal development and business in one app. And I'm honored that he asked me to be a part of it as well and contribute on a weekly basis, and I do. So go over there and get signed up. You're going to get a free, tuition-free voucher to go to an event with Brendan and myself and a bunch of other influencers as well. So you get a free event out of it also. So go to growthday.com/ed. That's growthday.com/ed. Be a leader. A true leader sets the standard, leading by example and diving into life with a passion. For those who embrace the thrill of the journey, there's the Range Rover Sport. Sporting luxury redefined. It offers peerless refinement on every drive. With its dramatic modernity and distinctive character, the Range Rover Sport is all about enhanced comfort and refinement. Enjoy the silence of the active noise cancellation, feel refreshed cabin air purification, and relax with massage setting. Ready to experience the next level of luxury? Explore the Range Rover Sport at LandRoverUSA.com. Welcome back to the show, everybody. So today we're going to talk about sleep. And by the way, if you don't get great sleep, you're going to listen very closely. And if you do think you get great sleep, you may think otherwise after we talk to this man today. I think he's the foremost expert on the planet in sleep. He's sort of, I don't know, I'd say his work sort of is the convergence of like neuroscience and sleep, where it sort of intersects. And I know I need this interview and this conversation and this information as much as anybody on the planet. So I'm going to put him to work today. And my guest today, by the way, great book. He's got a new book out that I should tell you about that we're going to talk about at the very end called The 7 Deadly Sins. But we're going to focus on a previous book of his called The Nocturnal Brain, Nightmares, Neuroscience, and the Secret World of Sleep, which I need to know a lot about. Dr. Guy Leschziner, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much for having me, although I think you may have oversold me a little.
Well, let's find out. Let's do this and see. I don't think that's the case. So let's start out fundamentally. I think everybody knows this, but health is such a huge topic online right now with everybody, anti-aging, live longer, live stronger. And it mainly focuses on nutrition, diet, exercise. And sort of this other guy sitting over there, almost nobody discusses or understands and thinks they have kind of wired is sleep. I'm just one of the people that admit I don't. So why does sleep matter so much from a neurological standpoint?
Well, I think the obvious thing to say is that we spend hopefully about 7 or 8 hours a night doing it. So it must have some importance. And actually, if you add up all the hours that you would be expected to sleep over an 85-year period, it's probably about somewhere in the order of about 30 years. So given that we spend so much of our lives doing it, it really illustrates the fact that it is probably crucial to every aspect of our lives. And certainly emerging evidence suggests that sleep is the, if not the cornerstone, then certainly a fundamental tenet of pretty much every aspect of our waking lives. So it's not just about sleep, it's about life itself.
You said hopefully 7 or 8 hours. So is there a metric you use to indicate? I was just with somebody, I'll tell you who it was. There's an author named John Maxwell. one of the most prominent authors of all time, one of my dear friends. John's in his late 70s. I was on a speaking tour with him. He sleeps 4 hours a night. And he said, so does his father and his brother, is what he was telling me. And I was
Mm.
with him. He's 78 years old. I'm going to tell you, he kicked my tail energetically on this tour. Is he sort of a freak? Is there a body type, a type of person who can get away with 4 or 5 hours? But yet that wouldn't be your advice to most people. I'd love to know about time asleep, since you said hopefully 7 or 8 hours.
Yeah, so we kind of use the ballpark of 7 or 8 hours as the average sleep requirement for people. But of course, as with any aspect of humanity, there's a spectrum. And there are individuals who fall outside of that 7 or 8 hours and don't necessarily have any pathological consequences to that.
Hmm.
I think what your friend is describing is, we know that there are a few rare families who have extremely short sleep times, extremely short sleep requirements, and don't seem to have any negative consequences. But I think that is very, very rare. And for the majority of individuals, they probably sit somewhere between 6.5 to 8.5 hours. So for the average individual, you are probably going to have some negative consequences, be that with regard to psychological health or cognition or performance or physical health, if you're sleeping much less than that. And if you're sleeping much more than that, then we know that there are issues. So, for example, when we look at mortality, all-cause mortality, or things like cardiovascular disease rates, stroke rates, those increase when people are sleeping more than about 9 hours. Now, that doesn't mean that sleep is toxic for you, but
Hmm.
it certainly implies that there are reasons as to why people might sleep for excessive periods of time, be that through other diseases, be that through drugs that might make them particularly sleepy, or be that through some sleep pathology that seem to incur increased risk of death. So so there is this sort of characteristic U-shaped curve when it comes to things like mortality and sleep duration.
So sleep aids, I'll throw them out to you and then I'll let you tell me what you think about them. So
Hmm.
nighttime teas that people drink, melatonin, all the way to, a lot of war fighters with PTSD, I know, are prescribed trazodone, which is, and what I've been told, I should be very careful. I won't even say it. I was going to say it's non-addictive, but I don't know that that's actually accurate. All the way to something like Ambien, which I'm told can become addictive. And if
Yeah.
I'm wrong about all of that, correct me. But how do you feel about those things? And can you blow out a receptor? Like, if you take too much melatonin, can you just blow out the receptor where it doesn't work on you anymore? Will
Yeah.
you need more sleep aids if you take medication to sleep over time, that your brain requires more of it to shut down? How do you feel about all of those things?
Well, I think your question illustrates the significant difference in practice between the US and the UK.
Mm,
Firstly, here in the UK, melatonin is by prescription only.
mm,
And the reason for that, well, first of all, it illustrates that we do think it works, because we wouldn't bother prescribing it.
mm,
It works for a range of conditions, and I use melatonin very frequently for people who've got issues with their circadian clock, for people with poor quality sleep, for people who act out their dreams, or for people who sleepwalk. So melatonin does work. It doesn't work for everyone.
yeah.
Um, Drugs like trazodone and other sedative drugs have their role for certain individuals. They should be used cautiously, and they shouldn't be prescribed to everyone who has a sleep disorder. Most
Mm,
people who have insomnia should really undergo CBT for insomnia first before being prescribed medications. But it would be wrong of me to say that I don't use these drugs very widely. I just use them a bit more cautiously,
okay.
because they all have pros and cons. Drugs like Ambien, like Stilnoct, yes, they are potentially addictive. They are potentially habit forming,
Mm,
and really should not be used in a long-term setting for the vast majority of individuals, because they can create issues. And one of the things that you've alluded to, which is this sort of, I think you used the term blowing out receptors, is we know that a lot of people habituate to these drugs. By habituate, I mean that they develop a tolerance for them. They require ever increasing doses in order to get the same effect. And that's essentially what you're doing. You are getting the system used to having these circulating drugs in it. And as a result, the receptors tend to be downgraded. They tend to be reduced. So you need an ever increasing dose in order to get the same effect. That's not the case for all of these drugs, but certainly for drugs like zopiclone and zolpidem, that can be a major issue.
So, hey guys, I want to jump in here for a second and talk about change and growth. And, by the way, it's no secret how people get ahead in life or how they grow. And also taking a look at the future. If you want to change your future, you got to change the things you're doing. If you continue to do the same things, you're probably going to produce the same results. But if you get into a new environment where you're learning new things and you're around other people that are growth oriented, you're much more likely to do that yourself. And that's why I love Growth Day. Write this down for a second. growthday.com/ed. My friend Brendan Bouchard has created the most incredible personal development and business app that I've ever seen in my life. Everything from goal setting software to personal accountability, journaling, courses, thousands of dollars worth of courses in there as well. I create content in there on Mondays where I contribute, as do a whole bunch of other influencers, like the Avengers of influencers and business minds in there. It's the Netflix for high achievers or people that want to be high achievers. So go check it out. My friend Brennan's made it very affordable, very easy to get involved. Go to growthday.com/ed. That's growthday.com/ed. And what I want to ask you about is, I'm asking this on behalf of a couple friends. Is there a difference between a nightmare and a dream? Number one. And number two, is there something to repetitive nightmares with somebody? So I have friends who, and I have had these too when I was younger, where it's the same nightmare over and over again. You almost realize you're in the nightmare again because you've had it so many times. Is there something happening in the brain? Is that trauma floating up now in our lives that makes a nightmare slightly different than a dream or a different type of dream? And what does a repetitive one potentially mean?
So on a neurological basis, I think a dream is the same as a nightmare. The difference is really that a nightmare is a dream with negative emotional content. And undoubtedly, the emotional content of our dreams is affected by our psychological status. So, people who are anxious will often have dreams that have negative emotional content. Anxiety is often a trigger for nightmares, for example. The second question which you asked is there anything to that recurring dream, that recurring nightmare? Well, this goes back to the answer that I gave with regard to post-traumatic stress disorder. So, if you envisage that dreaming is some sort of emotional cleansing of certain memories or certain experiences, and that dream needs to be completed in order for that emotional cleansing to be properly worked through, then if you wake up from that dream or that nightmare on a regular basis, that process is never finished. And so it's much more likely for you to then have that dream again or that nightmare again, because you're waking up because of that very strong emotional content of that memory, be that a real memory or be that a dream memory. You're never going to complete that process. There is one other aspect to nightmares, which is that people tend to think that all nightmares arise from REM sleep. But we know that a lot of people experience night terrors or other types of dreams, because we've learned in recent years that dreaming doesn't only occur in REM sleep, it also occurs in non-REM sleep. So people who have their non-REM sleep disrupted will often have visions of spiders on the wall or rats on the bed or being crushed by the ceiling coming in. Those are rather characteristic of non-REM dreaming. So the difference is that in REM sleep, in what we usually term dreaming sleep, those dreams are typically of a narrative structure. They're like a plot evolving in our minds. Whereas in non-REM sleep, it's much more snippets, visual snippets, often associated with very strong emotions. And that's what causes sleep terrors or night terrors. It's not the same thing as nightmare disorder.
By the way, everybody, we're going to get to dreams. So if sleep isn't part of your jam, we're about to talk about dreams in a minute. But I want to go to this. You're concerning me. I'll tell you why. I have some form of heart disease. I'm just curious. I want you to go a little deeper on this. I have struggled with sleep most of my life. recently, the last year, I've been many nights getting 9 and 10 hours and still waking up tired. If there's someone like me listening to this, I just want to go back to what you just said. Could that be an indicator of something more serious?
Well, I think there are really three determinants of how much sleep you need in order to wake up feeling refreshed. The first is genetics, and I think your friend illustrates the importance of genetics in defining your sleep duration, your required sleep. The second is your age. So we know that as we go through life, our sleep requirements are a little bit different. So somebody who is in their 50s is going to have a different sleep requirement to when they were in their 20s, and certainly a different sleep requirement to when they were an infant. The third thing is whether or not you've got anything that's disrupting your sleep. And
Mm,
one of the most common conditions that disrupt sleep is obstructive sleep apnea, which is when people snore and their airway collapses. And we know that conditions like sleep apnea, first of all, they make sleep less refreshing than it otherwise should be. It results in people feeling more sleepy than they should with the sleep that they're getting, but it also confers risk. And those risks include things like diabetes and more broadly metabolic syndrome. So this is the association of diabetes with obesity and high blood pressure, but it also seems to confer a risk of cardiovascular disease and stroke.
yeah.
So
My
if you
I want to interject there. Sorry, I didn't know we're on Zoom, everybody, but I want everyone to know most people in my audience know I'm kind of on a break right now for my health. And the reason I wanted to have you on was both of my doctors are obsessed, I would say, borderline obsession with a couple different markers in my blood. But one of the things they're obsessed with is my sleep and sleep apnea, and put me through a bunch of different sleep tests. Any of you that live with someone who snores or has any struggle with their breathing when they sleep, that's a very serious thing. And that you should do a sleep reading, in my opinion. I'm not a doctor. I'm just telling you, every doctor I've had that's treated me recently is worried about that one thing.
If you listen to this show for a while, you've heard me and my guests talk a lot about how critical it is to have your wellness goals in order, especially lately with me. So you know how powerful visualization is. When you visualize yourself 1, 10, 30 years from now, you've achieved all your goals. Ask yourself this: am I healthy at that point? In your visions, of course you are. But like anything else, without a plan to get and remain healthy, you can't hit the goal. And that's why I'm so thrilled to be partnering with Life Force. It's co-founded by my good friend Tony Robbins and Peter Diamandis. Life Force is a leader in proactive care. The Life Force membership includes everything you need to understand your wellness and help you make good decisions today that keep you on track in the future for your health. Listeners of my show get $250 when they first sign up for their membership by going to mylifeforce.com/ed. That's mylifeforce.com/ed. Take control of your wellness with Life Force and see what the healthiest version of you actually looks like and is capable of. These products and statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
I'm going to ask you a controversial question. I don't know if you've ever been asked this before, but my friends that have passed away young, and many of them have had cancer, and I know this is a reach, but I want to ask it anyway. One thing most of them had in common was a problem with deep sleep. And I'm wondering if you think or know, suspect, whatever, that potentially a lack of deep sleep could even, because you said neurology, could even affect gene expression of some type at all. Could the fact that a long-term challenge with sleep affect the way your genes turn on these different things we don't want, such as cancer, et cetera? Do you think there's a possibility of that? Is there any evidence of it, or would you speculate that that's true?
Yeah, I mean, I think that undoubtedly what happens when we don't sleep enough is that there are hormonal changes within our bodies. So, in particular, things like cortisol. So, cortisol is often raised in response to sleep restriction or insufficient sleep. Um, another thing that happens is that there is evidence of increased inflammation within the body. And obviously, increased inflammation is a risk factor for things like cardiovascular disease and potentially also cancer. What's interesting is that there is some evidence that circadian rhythm disruption, so people who are sleeping out of rhythm with their internal body clock, so shift workers, for example, is associated with an increased risk of certain cancers. And that evidence has resulted, for example, in certain countries in Northern Europe, in Scandinavia, actually having compensation schemes for government shift workers who develop certain forms of cancer. And the World Health Organization has added shift work onto its list of possible carcinogens. So certainly there is some evidence to support sleep as being, if not causative, potentially contributory to the development of certain cancers, amongst a whole host of other conditions.
Isn't that incredible, everybody? So it's not good to not have deep sleep. We've established that. So what should somebody do? What hacks or tips do you have that could help somebody who's struggling with sleep sleep better? Are there routines, methods? I hear often about cold in the room, or a cold blanket, or a cold pad, total darkness in a room. Anything like that you believe in or you'd add to?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what you're describing really is what we would broadly term sleep hygiene. So these are the behaviors surrounding sleep that are conducive to sleep. Certainly, a dark room is really quite important. In fact, there was a sort of recent paper that came out of China that used a very big patient resource in the UK called the UK Biobank that looked at light exposure and risk of diabetes. And they found that actually light exposure in the bedroom at night was associated with an increased risk of diabetes. So light exposure is really important. I think it's very difficult to be didactic because, for example, different temperatures in the room very much depend on your own physiology and your own anatomy, and people prefer to sleep at different temperatures. Certainly, cutting out caffeine at an appropriate time. It's important to understand that caffeine can hang around for a long time, and if you drink enough of it, it can hang around for an awfully long time. So making sure that your caffeine intake is relatively moderate, making sure that you're not doing lots of stimulating activities like scrolling on the internet or watching these kinds of interviews late at night in bed, it is all very conducive to a good night's sleep. It's important to stress that sleep hygiene, which is a horrible term, but it's something that a lot of people recognize, is not going to suddenly transform you from being a chronic insomniac into sleeping like a baby. And there are other techniques or other treatments that are perhaps more appropriate if you've tried making these changes to your behavior surrounding sleep and you're still sleeping very badly.
A lot of people tell me, everyone, that alcohol contributes to their lack of being able to sleep, which is ironic to me because it's a depressant. I would have thought that, it'd help people sleep. But so many of my friends say, boy, if I drink alcohol, especially as they get older, they have a hard time with deep sleep. By the way, I appreciate you saying they shouldn't be watching the show late at night, but I have been accused of putting people to sleep. So maybe they should listen to me. So are you like me? I just cleaned out my closet. Have you ever looked in your closet? You're like, what in the world did I buy that for? It's crazy, right? I have all this stuff in there I never wear. Like, what was I doing? That's why I'm so glad that Quince approached me to sponsor the show. So they sent me some shirts that I've been wearing recently. Love them. These polo shirts that I got and some of these t-shirts that I'm wearing, they're 100% European linen. They're so nice that I'm like, hey, this is stuff I want in my closet. Here's the crazy thing about Quince. You get like 50 to 80% off similar brands from Quince because what they do is they partner directly with the top factories. So Quince cuts out all the middlemen. They go right from the factory to delivering it to you. I love it. So fill your closet with stuff that you'll be wearing for summers to come that's going to last a long time, that you're proud to wear, and getting it half to better off is awesome. So go to quince.com/ed for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns if you don't like it. That's Quince, QUINCE.com/ed to get free shipping and a 365-day return policy. Quince.com/ed. I want to ask you this question. So this is from my producer. I've never done this before on the show, ever had my producers ask a question, but this is such a topic, and we're going to talk about dreams in a minute, everybody. But here's what Steven's asking. He says, I go to bed around 10:30 or 11, but I don't fall asleep until about 12 or 1 a.m. And when I do fall asleep, I'm waking up around 3 or 4 a.m. I'm struggling to get good sleep, constantly thinking in bed, but not stressed. Why would that be? Or what would your recommendation be? Why would that be? If he's not stressed, he can't stop thinking.
Yeah. One of the key aspects of people who develop insomnia is that they develop sometimes on a conscious level, but sometimes on an unconscious level, altered associations between bed and sleep. So what I mean by that is that for most of us, the bed is an environment that is associated with a diminishment of brain activity, a relaxation. But in individuals who have spent an awful lot of time in bed awake, that association is broken. And instead, they begin to associate either on a conscious or on an unconscious basis, an association between bed and wake. And so what a lot of people experience is a term that we use quite frequently, which is hyperarousal. So this is where your brain is activated, the hormonal systems within your body are activated, all of which precipitate an awakening, an elevation of wakefulness in bed. And that is crucial to the development and the persistence of chronic insomnia, because we need to try and break that association between bed and wake and rebuild the association between bed and sleep. So what Stephen is describing is a really characteristic feature, which is termed hyperarousal, associated with the sleeping environment.
Should he, I mean, maybe this is extreme. Should he switch rooms? Should he go to sleep in a different room to change the association short term and then come back when the association's been broken?
Yeah, so one of the ways in which we try and treat this is through a technique which is termed cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. And this has really become the gold standard treatment for people with insomnia. It's a structured program during which we try and break that negative association and rebuild it. And there are some tenets to it that I think very much are in keeping with what you're saying. So we tend to suggest that if people are awake in bed for more than about 20 minutes, they actually remove themselves entirely from the sleeping environment, go and do something relaxing like listening to music or reading a book, not exposing yourself to bright light, not consuming caffeine. And then when they start feeling sleepy again, to go back into the bedroom environment and try and go to sleep again. One of the other tenets of that is really to try and limit the amount of time that you are spending in bed awake. And the way that that is done within the umbrella of cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia is a protocol which is called sleep compression or sleep restriction. So say, for example, Stephen is only spending 6 hours a night in total in bed asleep, yet he's spending 9 or 10 hours in bed. Then what we would say within that context is, okay, for a period of time, we want you just to stay in bed for 6 hours, whether you sleep or not. And in the first few days, he will still have that insomnia. He'll still have that difficulty getting off to sleep. But as time goes on, he'll become more and more sleep deprived. And the sleep deprived brain, when it's really sleep deprived, will go to bed. And eventually what will happen is when he gets into bed at, say, midnight, because he's very sleep deprived, he'll fall asleep very quickly. And the brain is an adaptive creature. If you're very sleep deprived, it will try and compensate for that. Gradually, what that does is it reduces the amount of time you're in bed awake, and it is the first step in the process of breaking that association between bed and wake and rebuilding the association between bed and sleep.
That is so good. I have to just anecdotally tell you that, because I have struggled with this. I have decided that that is the place I sleep, and that's it. And so that means, guys, like you shouldn't be watching TV before you go to sleep at night. But if you do, I don't watch it in bed, because it's trained me that I'm awake in that bed for 2 or 3 hours. I don't get up in the morning and scroll my phone while I'm still sitting in bed, because it's training me to be awake in that bed. So little things like that they're significant, and they can impact your health, your performance. Of course, we already talked about this, but weight gain, obviously, with cortisol levels, there's all kinds of impacts on not getting the sleep that you need. Hey guys, you've been hearing about Mint Mobile probably everywhere, and I'm super excited that you're hearing about them now on the Ed Mylett Show, because I just switched my daughter's long distance service over to Mint Mobile because they use the same 5G service everybody else is using, but it's so much less money. So with big network providers, the big wireless ones, what you see is what you get. Somewhere between the store and your first month's bill, the price you thought you were paying magically skyrockets. So you can say bye-bye to your overpriced wireless plans with these jaw-dropping bills that you get every once in a while, unexpected overages, which we just got. So to get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/Mylett. That's mintmobile.com/Mylett. cut your wireless bill to 15 bucks a month. Mintmobile.com/Mylett. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to the $15 a month. New customers for the first 3-month plan only. Speed slower on 40 gigabytes on an unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See mintmobile.com for detail. What happens when we dream, and why do some people recall dreams more vividly than others?
Why do we dream? Well, that's a very important question that I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to fully answer. I think we have some indications as to why we dream. We think that it is important for memory consolidation. There is some evidence that dreaming is also about emotional processing. So, for example, cleansing our experiences, our daytime experiences of their emotional content. There's quite a lot of evidence, for example, when you look at people who've got post-traumatic stress disorder, one of the reasons why they repeatedly dream the event that they experienced that was traumatic is because the dream, when they have it, is so rich in emotional content that they fully wake up and that dream is never played through fully. And this has led some people, like, for example, Matthew Walker, who wrote the book Why We Sleep, to describe dreaming as overnight therapy. Now, why some people will recall their dreams and others won't? For the most part, people who recall their dreams are people who have had awakenings during the stage of sleep that we most associate with dreaming, which is called REM sleep. And so anything that destabilizes your sleep, particularly your REM sleep, is more likely to give you very vivid dream recall. The kinds of conditions that cause that are things like obstructive sleep apnea, because that is often worse in REM sleep and causes people to wake up. Anxiety and other psychological conditions can destabilize sleep. And then the other thing that I often see is individuals with narcolepsy, which is a brain disorder during which REM sleep is unstable as a result of the loss of a particular chemical in the brain. And people with narcolepsy can have absolutely amazing dreams with lots of lucid dreaming, so that they're aware of the fact that they're dreaming, or can sometimes even control their dreams. And they can even dream before they're fully asleep, so they can have dream experiences whilst they're awake as well.
Have you done much work on, you talk about REM sleep, of the different brainwave states, the alpha, beta, theta brainwave states, and what each of them do for us? Maybe you could share a little bit of that with everybody.
So I think there are a couple of things to say about the brainwaves and sleep. So we use the brainwaves actually to define the stages of sleep. And, you know, during wakefulness, particularly with our eyes closed, we see a very rapid rhythm, which is called alpha rhythm, which is very, very small in amplitude. And then as we become more drowsy, the brainwaves slow down. And as we go into the deeper stages of sleep, they slow down even more. And you start getting something called delta waves, which are really a hallmark of very deep sleep. Those are very slow, very big waves. When we go into REM sleep, actually, the brainwaves look rather similar to wakefulness. And actually, which is perhaps not that surprising, because our brains are very active, and but we're attending to our internal environment rather than our external environment. So there are some similarities in terms of brain activity between wakefulness and REM sleep. There is something crucial to add here, though, which is that actually different parts of the brain can exist in different stages of sleep or wake at the same time. So in conditions like, for example, sleepwalking, we know that there are certain areas of the brain that exhibit electrical activity that's in keeping with very deep sleep. But then there are other parts of the brain that actually look to be, at least electrically, awake. And there's a whole host of different experiences of different sleep conditions that really represent the brain's ability to exist in more than one stage of sleep or wake at the same time.
Someone says right now, this is a lot of info overload. I need to sleep better. I got the world's expert on the show right now, and he says, all right, I'm going to cast a wand. This is a general statement, but do this and you're going to sleep better.
Yeah, if only life was so easy. I think the key thing is to try and recognize what is going on with your sleep. So if you are spending a lot of time in bed and you're tired and you want to sleep but can't sleep, then that suggests you've got insomnia. If
Okay.
you are sleeping as much as you want, and you still wake up feeling unrefreshed and sleepy, then it suggests that you may have a sleep disorder. And that's the time to go and see your physician, because it's important to distinguish insomnia from a sleep disorder, because the treatments are sometimes very different indeed.
Mm.
If you are sleeping whenever you can when you're in bed, but you're getting less than about 7 or 8 hours sleep a night, then consider whether or not you are sleep deprived for you, and therefore try and give yourself an increased sleep opportunity and see if you feel better. So I think those are the three major pictures. Once you've recognized that you've got a sleep disorder, a biological sleep disorder, or insomnia, or whether you're just chronically sleep deprived, that is the key to really making progress in terms of improving your sleep.
So good. What is local sleep?
So I talked a little bit about the fact that different parts of the brain can exist in different stages of sleep or wake already.
Right.
But actually, there is now emerging evidence over the last few years that if you look at the cerebral cortex, the outer lining of the brain, and you look at the single neurons or collections of neurons within the cerebral cortex, there are constantly little islands of diminished electrical activity within the cerebral cortex. So even whilst we're wide awake, little areas of the cerebral cortex appear to be entering into a form of sleep. And as we get more and more tired, as we get more and more fatigued, those little islands become bigger, and the periods of electrical silence, the periods of electrical sleep get bigger and bigger, which perhaps is one explanation for why, when we are tired, when we are sleep deprived, our performance diminishes, because less of our cerebral cortex is able to function normally at that given time. So not only are aware of the fact that different parts of the brain can exist in different stages of sleep at the same time, but we're now understanding that the cerebral cortex, the outer lining of the brain, the bit of the brain that is responsible for complex tasks like thinking, like cognition, also exhibits these small islands of electrical silence that are akin to sleep. So while you and I are talking, probably 100th of our cerebral cortex is asleep, probably slightly more so in my case because it's later on in the day here in the UK. But as we get more and more sleep deprived, as we get more and more tired, perhaps it's a 50th of our cerebral cortex, perhaps even a 10th of our cerebral cortex.
This has been really enlightening, like really, really good. And I appreciate you having us switch rooms to get us. If those of you that are watching this on YouTube, you've seen the room change a couple times throughout the interview because we've had some reception issues. Dr. Leschziner has been a very, very good sport, and I'm very grateful. I learned a lot today. Now, by the way, if you learned a lot, that book that we're referring to that he wrote is called Nocturnal Brain, but he's got another book out right now, completely different book that we'll have him back on to talk about, called The 7 Deadly Sins, that you ought to go grab. It's just a very different book. It's got a lot to do with biology and your health, your behavior, society. I think you'd enjoy that as well. So, Guy, thank you for being here today. I really, really appreciate it. All the way from London, taking the time late over there and moving rooms to accommodate the conversation, because it was really informative. So thank you.
Great chatting with you, Ed.
Okay, God bless you. Thank you. Max out, everybody. Share the episode.